22 CF 363, State of Wisconsin versus Taylor Schabusiness. State appears by Deputy District Attorney Saunders and District Attorney Lezay. Schabusiness is here, as is her attorney, Mr. Frail, if you run the court's calendar. Really for a Daubert-type hearing this morning to address Dr. O'Donnell, who Mr. Freilich had submitted as a potential expert for the responsibility phase. So, Mr. Freilich?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, the defense does have Dr. Diane Lytton, PhD, as an expert to testify in phase 2 of this trial, the NGI phase. I did confer and consult with Dr. James T. O'Donnell yesterday after court to further talk about his opinions in this matter. I've had a number of discussions with him. I know that he is a pharmacologist who has lots of experience and has testified as an expert in the field of pharmacology in the past. I shared with him some of the concerns that the court had with regards to the 4 points of his trial opinion that was discussed yesterday. The defense had retained him some time ago, and he did testify at a motion hearing, I believe, back in June on legal issues related to the statements and other issues of that sort. After further analysis, after further contemplation and discussion, the defense has decided to not call him in phase 2 of this proceeding based on the comments that court made and some of the concerns that the court shared. We do not believe that it would be helpful at this point in time, and so we're going to not call him at this phase of the case.
Okay. And I respect that opinion, or that decision, rather. Mr. Freilich, I want to indicate that I raised the concerns yesterday because I was very much interested in focusing any testimony at this hearing today on areas where I thought some testimony would need to be directed. I wasn't deciding what was going to happen at this hearing, so I just want to make clear I didn't render a decision. That's why I'm here this morning, to listen to testimony. But I respect your decision to not call him, and that is your decision. And you're right. You have another expert that you're calling, who has already testified in this case as well. So there's no need for a hearing on that this morning. Obviously, the jury isn't going to be in for another 45 minutes, so we can't get going. We have a little bit of extra time. But a couple of things. First of all, does the state have anything you want to share on that, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Okay. A couple of things. I was asked by security this morning, Mr. Freilich, about whether your client needed to be in street clothes or whether simply the jail scrubs was fine. Frankly, I think the answer probably is she could have come in jail scrubs because that's the point in the proceeding we're at. On the other hand, I didn't care one way or the other. I'm sure security would have preferred it the other way, but I see that she's here in street clothes. And that's something that you wanted, Mr. Freilich, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so that's been accomplished, and we'll do it that way. Then when the jury returns, I think all I would do is give them instruction 603. And I don't know if the parties have that in front of you. If you don't, I'll get you a copy of it. But 603, 603 has a few what I'll call options. The first option is if the first phase was resolved with the plea of guilty or no contest, add the following, and then I was to insert the elements. That didn't occur in this case. So the only change I would suggest making to 603 is that the defendant has been found guilty of, and then list the offenses as I've done in these instructions so far, and then indicate We will now proceed with the second phase of the trial. During the second phase, you will be asked to determine whether the defendant is not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect, and then continue to read that instruction. First of all, I saw when I mentioned about whether or not you had it in front of you, you nodded, Mr. Saunders, you have it in front of you.
No, I don't, but I
You do?
reviewed it this morning.
Well, let me make, we can just make 2 copies. I'm assuming you need a copy as well.
I've got it in my binder.
Then I'll make Mr. Saunders a copy.
Thank you, Judge.
So I'll start with you, Mr. Freilich, because you have it. You probably looked at it as I've been talking. Any objection to my setting out 603 out in that fashion?
Makes sense, Your Honor.
Mr. Saunders?
No objection.
Okay. So that's what I'll do. And then I guess the only other issue is the order of questioning. I know the burden of proof now shifts to the defense. Generally, the party with the burden of proof goes first, although this is kind of one of those cases where the state generally is perceived as going first. Mr. Saunders, preference?
No, I agree. I think the defense has the burden, so they would start opening
their
statement,
witness.
we would respond, and then they would call witnesses.
Mr. Freilich?
That makes sense as well. I believe, in talking to Mr. Lissay, at the end, at closing, then I would have the rebuttal.
Right.
So,
That makes sense. So that's what we'll do. I'm going to keep you under the same timeframes I had for openings and closings during the guilt phase of the trial. Okay, anything else to take up? I'll go briefly modify that jury instruction. Anything else to bring up, Mr. Saunders?
I don't know if the court also wants to read the opening statement instruction too after 603. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but.
I can. That,
Okay.
that is not any objection to that, Mr. Freilich? There's
no, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll get the opening statement instruction. The proposed jury instruction guide is pretty sparse as to what they suggest we read. So, and frankly, at the end as well, there's 605, but nonetheless, we'll talk about that later. I'll get the opening instruction, the opening statement instruction. I'll read 603 first, then I'll read the opening statement instruction, and we'll go from there. Anything else, Mr. Saunders?
No, thank you.
Mr. Freilich, anything else?
Nothing else, thank you.
Okay, well, the jury will be in at 9:15, so we have a little bit of time, and we'll be back on the record at 9:15. We're in recess.
Thank you.
jury is present. Is there anything that we need to take up before we bring the jury in, Mr. Sanders?
Briefly, that's okay, sorry.
Have a seat.
So I told counsel, it doesn't seem like there's a large issue, but I just wanted to make a record of incidental contact I had with the juror. I was entering the restroom, he was exiting the restroom, and there were reflexive warning comments. I then realized he was a juror. There wasn't any further contact. That was about 8:40 a.m., so I was admittedly a little surprised to see a juror here this early, but I just wanted to make a record of that.
Okay. Mr. Freilich, anything you wanted to say to that?
Your Honor, Mr. Saunders told me about this. I don't believe it's really an issue at all.
These types of things periodically happen, and usually it's incredibly innocuous. So we give the instruction to the jurors not to talk to the attorneys and parties not to talk to the jurors. You see somebody, you feel like you're compelled to say hi. In this case, Mr. Saunders, it seems like wasn't even aware that it was a juror, and was not even expecting to see a juror. Sometimes the jury's sitting there, and you don't study their faces so you know what you're dealing with. I'm satisfied, given what he's represented, that there was no intent in what occurred, and the exchange was innocuous and really was the case. But I appreciate you letting me know, Mr. Saunders. Anything else before bringing the jury?
No, thank you.
Mr. Freilich?
No, Your Honor, thank you so much.
Very good. And we will we'll bring the jury. Okay, be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you had a good evening. This is the second phase of the trial, and I'm going to give you these instructions. The defendant has been found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. We will now proceed with the second phase of this trial. During the second phase, you will be asked to determine whether the defendant is not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect. Before you may find the defendant is not responsible for the criminal conduct, the defendant must satisfy you to a reasonable certainty by the greater weight of the credible evidence that at the time the crime was committed, the defendant had a mental disease or defect, and as a result lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct or to conform that conduct to the requirements of the law. This issue will be presented to you in the form of two questions. First, at the time the crime was committed, did the defendant have a mental disease or defect? Second, as a result of the mental disease or defect, did the defendant lack substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct or to conform that conduct to the requirements of the law? You will be asked to answer the second question only if you answer the first question, yes. If you find the defendant is not responsible for the criminal conduct, the defendant will be committed to the custody of the Department of Health Services and will be placed in an appropriate institution unless the court determines that the defendant would not pose a danger to herself or to others if released under conditions ordered by the court. The only issue at this second phase of the trial is the defendant's mental condition at the time of the offense. The lawyers will now make opening statements. The purpose of an opening statement is to give the lawyers an opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence will show so that you will better understand the evidence as it is introduced during the trial. I must caution you, however, that the opening statements are not evidence. And ladies and gentlemen, because this phase of the trial, the burden of proof shifts to the defense. The order of questioning and presentation will change, and Mr. Freilich will go first. Mr. Freilich, are you prepared to make your opening statement?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you. Your Honor, may it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. Mr. Lissay, Mr. Saunders, prosecutors for the state of Wisconsin. You're going to hear some testimony in this case from the defense expert, Dr. Diane Lytton. She's from the Menasha area. She's a PhD. She's a forensic psychologist. You're going to hear testimony from the state doctors as well, Dr. Matthew Seipel and Dr. Christina Engin. The burden does shift to the defense in this particular case. We're in phase 2 now, and the burden shifts to the defense, to me, to ask you to consider whether the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, is responsible or is not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect. And Wisconsin law, under Wisconsin statutes 971.15, does require the defense to satisfy you jurors to a reasonable certainty by the greater weight of the credible evidence that at the time the crimes were committed, which was February 22nd of 2022, that Taylor Schabusiness had a mental disease or had a mental defect, and that as a result, she lacked the substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. So that's packed with a lot of information that you're going to have to consider. I did tell you yesterday that you're kind of like analysts. You're going to have to listen to the testimony, listen to the facts, assess the credibility of the witnesses, assess the information that you're receiving, and then you'll have to make some decisions and considerations on these important legal issues. The defense did retain Dr. Diane Lytton. She interviewed Taylor Schabusiness. We believe that the evidence will show that she did a thorough evaluation of Ms. Schabusiness's mental status, that you will hear about Dr. Lytton's extensive experience in the field of psychology. When you have experts, you kind of heard from other experts, and they have a resume or a CV. In the field, we say CV, curriculum vitae. It's a list of their experience in training and education. And you're going to hear that Dr. Lytton has been a psychologist since 1993, that she has extensive experience, that she has approximately 3,000 hours of postdoctoral training, that she conducted hundreds of forensic evaluations and GI competency evaluations, things of that sort. You will hear testimony that she worked at Mendota Mental Health Institution here in Wisconsin, that she looked at many different evaluations performed on Taylor Schabusiness, including from Dr. Tracy Lucetta, Dr. Matthew Seipel, Dr. Christina Engin, Dr. Deborah Collins. And you will hear that Dr. Lytton, we believe she'll testify that she looked at a whole myriad of records, including jail records, mental health records, a court order, an order for civil commitment, mental health order, an order to take psychotropic medications, basically a medication order. She will, I believe, testify that she reviewed Nicolay Psychiatric Center mental health records from Brown County. She will talk and testify about her contacts with Ms. Schabusiness on the different occasions that she met with her. One being a situation where a chair was thrown by my client at her before I got involved in the case. She will testify that she did have another interview with her at the jail, and she asked me to sit in. So you're going to hear about all of her findings, her observations, and her opinions in this particular case. We believe that she has extensive experience. She's been in this field for a very long time, and that you need to pay close attention to what she says and give her opinions strong consideration. Give it due weight. And we believe that her testimony will be that she's of the opinion that Taylor Schabusiness does qualify for the NGI plea based on her diagnosis of a serious mental disorder. And that she has some other opinions, and she'll tell you about those when she testifies. You will hear, I believe, testimony from my client's father, Arturo Coronado. And I believe that he will come here. He's been summoned by the defense, by subpoena, to answer some questions about his daughter growing up, how she was, what kind of issues or problems did she have, what kind of mental health issues, and what he did to try and help her get treatment. You will hear from Dr. Lytton about my client's mother, that she lost her mother at a young age, and that was a pivotal event in her life. Dr. Lytton will also provide some testimony about the fact that she believes there may have been a budding personality disorder, and that she saw a really disturbed teen when she assessed all of the school records. She looked at all the school records and did a table or a chart. She looked at the mental health history. She did a one-page chart on that. You know, the burden of proof in this case does rest with the defense on the NGI issue. I think that the testimony from all of these different professionals, these different doctors, these psychologists who talk about behavior and things of that sort, you can hear their testimony about all of the different problems, all of the different mental health issues, all of the different behavioral issues that Taylor Schabusiness had growing up as a kid, as a youth. She had a lot of obstacles that she had to face growing up. We believe Dr. Lytton will also provide some testimony about my client's prior treatment with antipsychotic medications. She will testify about my client going off these antipsychotic medications sometime after her inpatient treatment in 2021. And Dr. Lytton will set up and provide the background history and information on Taylor Schabusiness's life and upbringing. So the defense does have the burden of proof on this issue of whether our client is responsible for these crimes. But we believe that the testimony and the evidence will show that at the time of the offense that she did have a mental disease or defect. We believe that the information and the testimony will show and hopefully lead to you to conclude that she lacked the substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. And what I ask is that you just sit back, carefully listen to what these experts have to say, and then render a fair and just result. Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, are you prepared to make an opening statement?
I am.
Go ahead.
Good morning. So, when I said in opening on Monday that this case is about choices and responsibility, this is what we're referring to, right? The responsibility phase is what we're here for now. Essentially, you're being asked, what was the defendant's mental state at the time of the offenses for which she's convicted, and whether she should be responsible for that. Let's address the obvious. What Ms. Schabusiness did to Shad is disturbing. It's conduct we don't see often. It's conduct that you may hear about and think, my gosh, that person must not have been in their right mind when that happened. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you otherwise. But you've already carefully listened to the evidence and followed the law that the judge gave you. And you'll do so going forward as well. Because you will be told what a mental disease or defect is and what it is not. A mental disease is not antisocial conduct. It's not conduct brought about by use of a controlled substance, a temporary mental state caused by a controlled substance. A person is not mentally ill just because they commit something that's unnatural, that's so enormous, that just is beyond comprehension, right? You'll be instructed that those are not mental diseases or defects. So as disturbing as the conduct you already heard about is, and may be, that's not where the analysis ends. You'll hear from several experts. Defense already went over Dr. Lytton and her qualifications and how she supports Ms. Schabusiness's NGI plea. But you'll also hear some issues with Dr. Lytton's methodology, her analysis, and ultimately her conclusions. The state will call several psychologists of its own, both of whom were actually court-appointed, not by either party, by the court, when they did their analysis and meetings with Ms. Schabusiness. Dr. Matthew Seipel will talk about some of the issues that he had with Dr. Lytton's methodology and her conclusions. He'll testify about those. You'll also hear from the court-appointed expert, Dr. Christina Engen. Again, came here on a court order, not retained by either side. And she'll tell you that she does not believe Ms. Schabusiness is suffering from a mental disease or defect, or that she was unable or lacked substantial capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of law or appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct. Okay? So you'll hear from a variety of witnesses, some of whom are experts, some of whom are lay witnesses or civilians. You'll hear about, and you've already heard about, confounding all of this is the defendant's drug use immediately before the offense. We've all heard about that. Defendants admitting that and acknowledging that. You'll hear about how methamphetamine has those effects, has effects of psychosis, that has that result in people. And again, it's not a mental disease or defect if you're using controlled substances and it causes that result. So you'll hear from these experts and witnesses, but ultimately, in our state, whether somebody is suffering from a mental disease or defect is a jury determination. It's up to you, based on the facts and opinions that you hear. Certainly the opinions of the experts will be valuable for you, but you've already heard all the evidence. You know more about this case than any of these experts likely do. You heard testimony about Ms. Schabusiness's mental state both before and after, in close proximity to the offenses that she's convicted of. You've heard her friends, her roommate, officers who had contact with her, Mr. Hendricks, Ms. Pakinich, describe their interactions in close proximity to this offense and reported nothing out of the ordinary, some of whom are her friends who've known her for quite a while. Mr. Gannon, Mr. Tomes, you've already heard about their observations of the defendant. But more importantly, you saw the defendant's own words. Hours after all of these offenses occurred, really close proximity, you saw her be able to recall, be able to talk about it, and more importantly, you saw her mannerisms, how she was talking about it. Did not appear anyone was suffering under some manic episode. She's calmly talking about it with officers, providing information that is consistent with everything they're seeing. What does that indicate? She's aware of what's going on. She remembers everything. This isn't somebody who is not appreciating what happened. So that's why we call all these experts, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a jury determination. It's a factual issue for you. And the state believes that when you hear all that evidence and consider the evidence you heard in the first phase, that you'll find the defendant has failed to meet her burden, that she should be held responsible for the conduct that she's convicted of and what she did to Shad. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Freilich, are you prepared to call your first witness?
I need to confer with Lieutenant. Oh, yes. My witness is on his way up, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we get our little notepads back?
They'll give you those right there. They want their notepads back.
Thank you. Okay.
Is that all your stuff? It's almost.
Yep.
Mr. Freilich, this
Yes, sir.
is,
Arturo Coronado.
okay. Sir, if you could just, if you could stay standing and turn and face her, and as best you can, raise your right hand.
Do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Arturo Coronado.
Okay, Mr. Freilich, the witness is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Coronado, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, how old are you?
51.
What is your date of birth?
5/24/72.
Are you currently married, sir?
I am not.
You are living in Green Bay, correct?
Yeah, you know that, Chris.
Okay. And your daughter is Taylor Denise Schabusiness, is that fair?
She is.
Who is her mother?
Marla,
Okay. And you were married to Marla for a while, sir?
of course.
How many years was it?
We were married about 10, together about 15, 16.
Did you live together in Wisconsin or some other state?
Illinois.
Illinois?
Illinois and Wisconsin.
And where was your daughter Taylor Schabusiness born?
In Evanston, Illinois.
Does Taylor have a sister or brother?
She has a brother that passed away last year.
Okay. What was his name?
AJ, Arturo Drep,
Okay.
J-R-E-P,
And why did he pass away? What happened?
July 1st last year. Motorcycle accident.
Okay. When you were living in Illinois with your daughter Taylor Schabusiness, was she ever brought to a hospital at all?
No.
Okay. Did she ever receive any mental health treatment when you lived in Illinois?
No.
Did something happen to Taylor's mother at some point?
She passed away.
Okay.
She passed away May 20th, 2009, in her sleep.
Okay. Did that take a toll on your daughter Taylor?
Well, of course.
Can you tell me a little
Took a
bit,
toll
sir?
on my son as well and me.
Okay. Right. It took a toll on everybody, correct?
But yeah,
And when her mother passed away in May of 2009, how old was Taylor?
11, probably 11 and a half.
Okay.
My
And-
son and daughter were, about 9 and a half and 11 and a half years old.
Okay. Did Taylor go to school that day that her mother passed away?
I tried to get them to go to school, but they knew something was going on.
Okay.
They came back.
Can you describe a little bit how the death of Taylor's mother took a toll on her or impacted her? Can you give me a little bit of commentary on that?
Well, they were pretty young. I mean, obviously, their mom's not around anymore. And, Marla was ill. So just, I guess, they kind of knew what was going on, but it was unexpected. We watched a movie the night before and fell asleep, and I woke up and my wife was already cold, already passed.
You found her?
She was laying next to me.
Okay. And what about the kids? What about Taylor? Did she see her mom in that state?
They did not see. No, I did not allow that.
Okay. But were the kids in the house?
They were upstairs in their bedrooms.
Okay. After that occurred, did you see any changes in Taylor's behavior, first of all?
She was a little rambunctious. Nothing. I mean, she played volleyball. She had a good amount of friends she hung out with. She was a normal kid.
Did things change at all for her?
I wouldn't say too much. She got in trouble a little bit at school, but I don't know, something with a band instrument.
What happened with that?
She just took somebody's band instrument
And
and then returned it, but nothing major.
when did you come to Green Bay? What year? Do you know?
2000. I started working here in 2007.
2007? Where did you work at?
I worked for Verizon
Okay.
before. It was GTE, then turned into Verizon.
Okay.
18 years.
Right. And when you came to Green Bay, did Taylor go to school here then?
Of course.
Of course. Where did she go to school?
She went through the Howard Swamico School District.
Then did she go to Bayport High School as well?
Yes, sir.
Did you get information that she was having issues at school?
Well, yeah.
What can you tell me?
From what I can recall, just normal just kind of acting out, I guess. Just, there's a couple of little instances that happened in high school, but it's kind of why I yanked her out of there and sent her to Texas so she can graduate and kind of get away from the issues that were going on here.
She went to Texas to live with her grandparents?
Correct.
When was that, do you know?
2017, I believe, I'm not sure.
Okay. How old was she in 2017, do you know?
She was 16 and a half, probably 17.
16, 17. How long did she live with her grandparents then in Texas?
About a year, a little over a year until she graduated. Maybe 2 years. About a year, maybe a year and a half.
Was that Cotulla, Texas?
That's correct.
Was there a point where she got pregnant?
Well, about a year and a half ago, maybe?
Okay. And
Yeah.
and she had a baby, correct?
Yes, she did.
And the baby is currently living in Texas with the grandparents, correct?
Yeah, how is that relevant to anything here? Why do we need to talk about him?
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So, before the baby was born, was she placed at Nicolay Psychiatric Center?
Before the baby was born?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay. Did you see her at the Nicolay Psychiatric Center
Oh,
when she was
yeah,
there?
yeah, I'm sorry, it's just so much going on.
It's through Brown County.
Yeah, I went to take her there myself, actually.
Okay. Why did you
Yeah.
take her there?
She just wasn't in the right state of mind.
Was she suicidal?
Probably,
Was she psychotic?
I guess.
Objection, I don't think this witness has the ability to answer that question.
Rephrase the question.
Okay. All right. Was she experiencing like hallucinations?
She
and
just,
things?
yeah, she was not in the right state of mind at all, so I feared that she would hurt herself, so that's why I took her, and we both agreed, we both went there together
And
and tried to get help, and then ended up releasing her, and she came home, and that was about it.
okay. Was she prescribed some medications and things like that?
She was at that evening, no, but yeah, she has been on some medications that she'd never liked taking those pills. I mean, they kind of messed her up even worse.
Did they cause her to hallucinate or cause her to have?
I think
Problems?
it all started with a Seroquel that was taken, back, I don't understand too much about those prescription drugs, but they never agreed with her at all.
Okay. And do you know the other medications that she was asked to take?
ADHD, Adderall, I believe.
Anything about Haldol?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I know she was prescribed some stuff, but I don't know the names.
Okay. Did you talk to some of the doctors or psychiatrists at the Nicolay Psychiatric Facility?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think this witness can offer his observations and the facts that he's aware of from what he observed of Ms. Schabusiness with respect to what he learned from doctors about her mental health conditions. We have professionals who are going to answer questions based on the records. Those people are better equipped to answer those questions. The information he received from doctors is hearsay.
It's not hearsay. I didn't ask what they said. I just asked if you talked to the doctors, Your Honor.
Sure. So the question that's pending isn't asking for hearsay. I think the objection was made because it sounds like that's where we're headed. So he can answer the question that was just asked, and then I'll just indicate, Mr. Freilich, that objection is probably coming if you go to the next step. But the question that's pending can be answered. So I think the question was, did you talk to anybody at Nicolay?
I did.
Okay. Ask another question, Mr.
Okay.
Freilich.
Did Taylor live with you in Green Bay for a while?
For a little bit, yeah.
Was that in 2021, or what year was it?
I believe so, yeah. But again, speaking to them and, her being an adult, they really, even being a father, weren't allowed to disclose anything,
Right,
you know.
sure. When she lived with you, sir, what address did she live with you at?
1130 Moraine Way.
And how long did she live with you?
Just a few months.
Did it ever come to a point where you didn't want her to stay there anymore because her behaviors were getting worse, or her mental status was getting worse?
No, I love my daughter, so I'll do whatever it takes to help her out.
Did you ever review any of her records at all?
Objection. I don't think he can testify to the content of, again, I think it's the same objection. He can answer whether he reviewed them. He can't answer anything about the content of the records.
Your Honor, the state, what they're trying to do is, they're trying to anticipate an objection. They know this one is not an objectionable one, in my opinion. And any good parent, when you go to the doctor, you're going to talk with the physician or the psychologist or whoever it is about the status of your child. So I'm just
Yeah.
asking that.
It's not like I didn't try. I tried talking
Hold
to her.
it, wait. So I'm going to overrule the objection at this point, and the question can be asked. Mr. Freilich, why don't you ask it again so the witness has it in his mind?
Okay, Your Honor. I kind of forgot, so hopefully
Did you review some of the records of your daughter? Did you review any of the records?
Like at the facility?
Yes.
Again, she was an adult at the time, and I can't, you know.
I think the answer was no,
She
Mr.
was,
Freilich.
yeah.
Okay. When she was living at your house, sir, on Moraine Way, was she ever experiencing any hallucinations or anything like that?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Just know that she wasn't in the right frame of mind, you know, kind of see things. She'd like to walk around and, you know, we take a walk, cemetery, just right down the street. But she just needed, you know, just to kind of get out and walk around and, I guess, ease her mind.
Did you have concerns about her from a physical or mental standpoint?
Always,
Okay,
always.
all right, thank you. Nothing further. I appreciate that.
Do you have any cross-examination?
Just briefly, Mr. Coronado, were you aware of whether or not your daughter was employed during the time that she was residing with you on Moraine Way?
She was not at the time, no.
Do you know anything about her employment history as an adult?
Sure.
And had she held jobs in the past?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Do you know where she worked?
She worked for Saputo. She worked a couple of years, Saputo, 3.5 years probably.
And is that relatively recently? Prior to her arrest, of course.
Well, yeah. Yeah, right, prior to.
And
She was doing really well there too, until her boyfriend/husband got out of jail. That turned everything upside down.
yeah, in part because of the methamphetamine use, right?
Yep,
So Taylor was doing pretty well, and then she started using the drugs.
yeah.
No further questions.
Pretty bad drug too.
Anything on that, Mr. Freilich?
What was the drug?
No, meth, heroin, whatever else, I don't know.
Marijuana?
Kids- Yeah, I don't know. The kid was already doing that shit before and just a fucking loser, and he got my daughter involved in that shit.
Okay, thank you, sir. Nothing else.
Anything on that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You can step down.
I love you too. Go Bears. Take care of them.
Next witness, Mr. Freilich.
I call Dr. Diane Lytton, PhD, Your Honor.
doctor, if you want to just step right up over here. Right up over here.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter, now before the court, so help you God?
Yes.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Diane Lytton.
Okay, Mr. Freilich, then the witness is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
State your name for the record again.
Diane Lytton,
Can you spell that?
Lytton.
And what is your occupation?
I'm an independent forensic psychologist
Where is your office?
in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
And are you a PhD?
I am.
Does that make you a licensed psychologist?
Well, I earned the PhD first and then became a licensed psychologist.
Okay. Could you briefly provide me with your educational background?
Sure, I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD doctoral degree. All three are in the field of psychology.
How long have you been a licensed psychologist?
June 1993.
And did you work for UW-Madison?
I was during my PhD program at UW-Madison, during the graduate program, I was what's called a research assistant for the professors, for my professor. So that was my work when I was getting my PhD.
Okay. Initially, when you got your PhD, where did you work?
I worked for the University of Wisconsin, initially in an internship, administrative internship through University of Wisconsin system. I did that for a year, and then I became a research scientist at UW-Madison.
Did you work at Mendota Mental Health Institute?
I did.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
After taking off about 5 years for family matters, I then retrained to become a clinical licensed psychologist. And that took me 3,000 hours at Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison. And then they hired me as a staff psychologist. And so I was at Mendota for about 7 years, 1991 until 1997, when I became independent forensic psychologist. And I was a therapist too for some years too.
Okay. As a psychologist, do you conduct NGI evaluations, competency evaluations, psychological evaluations?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of patients did you treat as a forensic psychologist?
A variety. The ones inpatient at Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison, we used to have what called the adult and, teenage and child, not forensic units, but child units. For a while I was on a juvenile adolescent unit, and then I worked for a couple years on what's called the civil unit, adults. They're no longer at Mendota now, but then the last part of that 7 years, I was in the forensic units, people who were committed under the insanity, NGI. And then also, so most of the patients I dealt with were had been found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, and the other patients were there for competency to proceed to trial evaluation. So I had both.
Did you also deal with guardianships?
Peripherally when I worked at Mendota, but since being privately employed, I do numerous guardianship evaluations for Outagamie County.
Had you also been involved in doing sex offender evaluations as well?
Yes,
Now, you have a curriculum vitae, correct?
yeah, very small one, yeah, resume,
And you did provide that to me, is that fair?
yes.
Counsel, just to clarify, we're starting over with numbers. This is Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, can I have permission to approach?
You may.
Thank you. Dr. Lytton, I'll show you what's marked as exhibit number 1.
Yes,
Can you tell me what that is?
that's my brief resume.
And does your resume or curriculum vitae contain information about your educational background?
Yes,
Does it contain information about other patients or cases you've worked on?
well, it summarizes my jobs over since 1975, so, yeah.
Okay.
And the type of cases that I do for the last 32 years?
Okay. And your license is still in effect, correct?
Yes.
Is everything in that curriculum vitae Exhibit 1 true and accurate as of today?
Well, except I wasn't able to do the online renewal of my American Psychological Association membership. I found that out this year, so I had to call them up and do that. So that's the only thing. As far as I know, that's the only thing that's not accurate.
But you're licensed in the state of Wisconsin.
Correct.
Offer Exhibit 1.
Any objection?
No.
One will be received.
Thank you. Now, were you provided with some brief background information about this case?
Yes.
And were you provided information from prior counsel and from me?
Yes.
What kinds of information did you review in this case?
It was voluminous, and I asked for more information too. The records, though, discovery, included the criminal complaints for the offense, prior offenses from 2020. That's the police records and the formal criminal complaint. And then inpatient, a 21-day inpatient psychiatric hospitalization at Nicolay.
Can I stop you right there? Did you receive those documents?
Yes,
Did you receive the order for civil commitment?
yes,
Did you receive an order for psychotropic medications for Taylor Schabusiness?
yes,
And you looked at those legal documents?
yes.
What year was that, do you know?
Yeah, which year?
When those orders were entered, the civil commitment order?
2021, I believe, for a 6-month order for civil commitment and the order to treat.
I apologize for interrupting you, but, Your Honor, can I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits 2 and 3. First, could you identify what exhibit 2 is?
2 is a state of Wisconsin, Brown County order of commitment.
Is that for Taylor Schabusiness?
Yes.
And exhibit 3?
That is a state of Wisconsin, Brown County order for involuntary medication and treatment.
Is that for Taylor Schabusiness?
Yes.
Is that from 2021?
Yes.
Do those documents indicate that she was mentally ill at that time?
Yes,
And that she was court-ordered to take some medications?
exactly.
Are those documents that you reviewed as part of your evaluation in this case?
Yes.
Offer exhibits 2 and 3?
Any objection?
No.
2 and 3 will be received.
So, Dr. Lytton, you can carry on. What other documents or things did you look at as part of your evaluation?
I reviewed the other evaluators in this case, their reports, and then the 2 inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations from Bellin here in Green Bay. I reviewed voluminous school records, which I don't often get in these cases. But the school records for Ms. Schabusiness covered kindergarten through 11th grade and all the behavior incidences. So I think that's about it. And then the Prevea, we've asked for those records, but they haven't been received yet.
Did you review Nicolay Psychiatric Center records from through Brown County?
Yes,
Did you review the report from Dr. Christina Engine,
yes,
Dr. Tracy Lucetta,
yes,
Dr. Matthew T. Seipel,
yes,
Dr. Deborah Collins?
yes,
Those are all psychologists, correct?
yes, they are.
Did you also review the criminal complaints and police reports and other case materials?
Yes,
Were you able to, well, before I get into that, did you prepare 2 tables, so
I
to
did.
speak? Okay.
yes.
Can you tell me what the tables are?
The simpler table, 1 page, is Ms. Schabusiness's mental health history with just the names of the records, the date of the treatment, if it was known, her age at the time, and then the diagnosis, medications, and the conditions. So that was the 1 page. And then the other one was prepared by her school, and it reflects 6th grade through 11th grade, but this is just the table that the school had prepared. I had also, though, reviewed her kindergarten through 5th grade. So this table is 6th grade through 11th, but I also reviewed kindergarten through 5th grade, too.
Okay. And you brought these tables here and provided them to me, correct?
Yes,
And they've been provided to the state?
I guess. I don't know. Were they provided to the state?
Yes, they were.
Okay, yes, yes.
Your Honor?
Yeah, you told me that.
Thank you. Can I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Dr. Lytton, Exhibit 4 is being presented to you. Exhibit 5 is being presented to you. Could you comment on Exhibit 4 first, please?
Exhibit 4 is a 1-page table, Taylor Schabusiness mental health history, with the record, the information came from, the date, if it's known, of inpatient or jail records, her approximate ages, and then the conditions during that, either psychiatric treatment or in jail, the conditions, if they did make any diagnosis of her, and then medications, if there were medications prescribed. So that's what Exhibit 4 is.
Could you take me through that in a little bit more detail as to the treatments she received and the medications?
Yes. And from the age of about 7 through 14, she was treated, and again, I can't remember how the Prevea, here in Green Bay or this area. probably outpatient, so ages about 7 to 14, and we know the 14 is definite. She was seen for, and she was under psychiatric care, and I believe therapy, I think, counseling, for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, depression, and she was begun on Zoloft, an antidepressant, 2 to 3 weeks when she was 14 before the admission to Bellin. So that's on the next line. Bellin Health Psychiatric Center Adolescent Unit. She was there for 3 days, 2012, age 14. From the medical records, the conditions that they saw, the psychiatrists, the mental health people at Bellin, a thought disturbance, hallucinations, delusions, suicidal, depression. She was initially diagnosed with bipolar 1, depression, severe, with psychosis. She was put on an antipsychotic medication, Seroquel, and they discontinued the Zoloft that she had been taking 2 to 3 days, or 2 to 3 weeks before the admission. And the reason they discontinued the antidepressant medication is sometimes it can trigger worse symptoms in a person with bipolar. When she was discharged after the 3 days, no longer suicidal, she was then diagnosed with a mood disorder, not otherwise specified, without psychosis, but still, the psychiatrist noted there was still some paranoia. You want me to just continue?
Sure.
Okay. The next admission, psychiatric, was to the same facility, Bellin Health Psychiatric Center Adolescent Unit, inpatient. That was for 3 days, 2 years later, in 2014. She was diagnosed with a mood disorder with prior history of psychosis. She had a history of diagnosis of mood disorder, suicidal, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, history of hypomania, and marijuana use daily. She was prescribed medications to treat some medications, Lithobid, they're to manage bipolar disorder. She was prescribed Abilify, which is an antipsychotic medication, and they stopped the Seroquel that she had been on since the age of 14. The next is St. Mary's Emergency Room. She was there for just a brief visit, the ER, March 22nd, 2021. She was 23 years old. She was observed to have hallucinations, paranoia, delusions, and she was using, or she had a history, but I think she was using at that time, marijuana, methamphetamine. Okay, so that was 1 day at the ER. Then, and I believe, if I have this right, I believe she was in jail for 2020 offenses, and I believe she went to the emergency room in 2021 from the jail because of the psychosis. Okay, then we have the Nicolay Psychiatric Center inpatient from March 22nd, 2021 until April 12th, 2021. At that time, she had a 6-month civil commitment with an order to treat, which was what those exhibits 2 and 4 were, I think. Okay, this was 2021 for 21 days. The records indicate bipolar disorder, substance use, hallucinations, delusional, paranoia. She was initially on Abilify that she had been prescribed since age 16. And again, she was 23 during the 21-day at 23 years old during the 21 days at Nicolay. So they kept her on, I believe they kept her on Abilify, an antipsychotic medication, but then put her on an injected to make it easier. So you get the injections of an antipsychotic, Aristada, I think, Aristada, I can't pronounce it, Aristada. They put her on that so hoping that she'd be more compliant, easier. You go to the psychiatrist, get a shot. I don't remember if it's once a week. Some of them last a month, so I'm not sure about that one. And I think I said she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, substance use, had hallucinations, delusional, paranoia. The last records were the jail, Brown County Jail mental health records. That was from a stay 3 months in 2020, June to September 2020. She was 22 years old, and that regarded 2020 offenses, criminal. She was noted to be suicidal, bizarre behaviors, hallucinations, and had used methamphetamine and heroin. Then, from the ages of 24 to 25, currently, records from the jail were from January 4th, 2022 to July 9th, 2023. She had, and I'm getting these from their mental health records, psychiatrists, mental health people at the jail. They noted she had suicidal ideation, bizarre, self-injurious behaviors, many conduct reports. She was nonverbal and isolative in her cell at times. She smeared and drew on her cell walls with feces and menstrual blood. She was naked at times. She had hallucinations, intense anger at times. She was prescribed Risperdal, an antipsychotic medication for, quote, psychosis and impulse control. But she was usually non-compliant. Then as far as I know, the antipsychotic olanzapine is currently her medication prescribed at the jail, but she is typically been non-compliant with taking it. And that's it for that exhibit.
Did you generate a report on this particular case?
Yes.
All right, at this time I'll offer exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Some of them have already been admitted. I'm assuming the only one that hasn't been admitted is 4.
Okay, offer exhibit 4.
Any objection?
No.
4 be received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Lytton, you prepared a written report, correct?
Yes.
And was that dated July 3rd of 2023?
Yes.
Was it 15 pages?
About that, yes.
Did you sign it?
Yes. Oh, 9 pages.
You did review her medical and mental health history, correct?
Yes.
Her background, correct?
Yes.
Her family and social background, is that fair?
Yes.
Alcohol, drug abuse, and education?
Yes.
Sexual, physical abuse history, fair?
Yeah. Yes.
Jobs,
Yes.
charges?
Yes.
Tell me about the first interview that you did with her.
That took place February 7th, 2 attempted interviews, February 7th, 2023, at the jail in a conference room. She remained nonverbal the entire time when I attempted to interview her, and she suddenly ran to the corner of the room, picked up a plastic chair and threw it at me. I called the guards. Took them a couple minutes to get there. She sat down, I sat down, tried to calmly ask her why she threw the chair. She, again, was nonverbal. The guards came. I explained the situation. They initially said, yes, I should terminate the interview, but offered the possibility of taking Ms. Schabusiness to a secure booth to see if she'd interview. She nodded that she would be willing to go there and talk to me. We got there, and she again was nonverbal. That was the first 2 attempted interviews, February 7th, 2023.
So you had 2 interviews with her on that day?
2 on that day.
The one interview, was that in a room with just you and her and a table?
Yeah, yes.
And in that interview room, they have a stack of chairs there?
1 chair in the corner.
Okay. And then later you went to a more secure area where there was glass. Did you talk to her there?
I tried to, and she again was nonverbal.
That was before I got involved. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Then did you have the occasion to meet with her on a different date?
I did, when the last attorney, the original attorney on the case, after she threw the chair at me, was nonverbal on February 7th, 2023. Her defense attorney went, like the next day, went to discuss things about, why did you throw the chair? She didn't have an explanation. But she agreed, and she was verbal to the defense attorney. She told him, yes, she would then interview with me. He said, I'll come back tomorrow to double check. He returned, I guess, the next day. She again said she was verbal with him and agreed that she'd interview with me. So I returned on February 13th, 2023, and she refused to even come to the interview room. So those were the first 3 attempted interviews.
Was there an occasion where you had another interview with her?
I did, yes.
When was that?
On June 19th, 2023,
And was that at the Brown County Jail?
yes.
In the interview room?
In the conference room, yes.
And what is the conference room? Can you describe the layout there?
Not a huge room, but there's a table, a bigger table in the middle, and plastic chairs, thank goodness, plastic chairs. And then there was that the people sit on. And then, one plastic chair in the corner, not a huge conference room.
From the incident on February 7th where the chair was thrown at you, did you have some safety concerns, precautions?
With her or me? Or,
Yes.
She was handcuffed to a waist belt.
But I mean, did you have concerns from the incident on February 7th where the chair was thrown at you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
First time in 32 years, a chair's, anybody I've interviewed ever did that.
So on June 19th of 2023, you had another interview with her?
Yes.
Did you make any requests at all?
Well, for you to be there, but, you had already met with her several times. She had not been aggressive with you. Ideally, I wanted to meet with her in that conference room as opposed to behind plexiglass in a little tiny booth. So yeah, the June 19th, 2023 interview where she did talk was in that conference room.
And you asked me to sit in?
Yes, I did.
Did I interfere in any way?
No.
And so tell me a little bit about that interview on June 19th of 2023.
We only, I was only with her for 2 hours. She had a great deal of trouble, difficulty with paying attention and concentrating. My impression of her at that 2-hour interview was she was psychotic. She had visual, auditory, hearing, visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations. She was delusional. She was paranoid. She answered some of my questions. My impression of her was that she was really trying to answer questions, and she was verbal. This time she spoke with me. She was verbal, but my impression was that she was really trying to answer my questions. But her thinking was very, what we call disorganized, very delusional. She was actively hallucinating, hearing things, a train, a loud train whistle that she screaming, which she told me she hears in the courtroom too. As the 2 hours went on, she became so distracted and very, afraid. You could see it on her face, fear, because of the delusions she was experiencing right then. She got more and more scared about what she thought she saw, a train, and of this louder, louder, louder whistle. So after 2 hours, that was it. She was so, in my impression was that she was so distressed. I didn't want to continue the interview. Then I felt I would be inflicting more harm on her if I continued the interview. So she gave me some information about her bipolar condition, her mental health history, family. Yeah, that was.
Dr. Lytton, thank you. Do you have an opinion on whether or not Ms. Schabusiness's memory for remote or recent events was impaired when you met with her?
Yes.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Not only did I see that memory issues, impairment in the 2-hour interview, but I see it in her records too. She can sometimes remember remote events, like, pretty well, where she lived, approximate dates, the approximate time her mother died, and so the date when she got married, roughly. It's a little fuzzy, but yeah, better remote memory. But she often will, in the same interview with treaters, evaluators, she'll be confused. And I saw memory impairments during the 2 hours, memory gaps, kind of a person with bipolar disorder or other psychotic disorder like schizophrenia. When they're actively psychotic, we sometimes see memory gaps for the time they were very psychotic, or with bipolar 1 disorder, when they're in a manic state, they can often forget what's going on. Then when they come out of the psychosis, sometimes they'll have a spotty memory. Sometimes the whole memory will come back of what they were doing, what happened during the psychotic episode. But sometimes it's totally blank. Sometimes it comes partially back. And sometimes they try to reconstruct what happened, and you get a kind of a funny reconstruction. How do they explain their behavior when they were manic with bipolar or psychotic from schizophrenia, for example? They'll do a funny, not funny, haha, but bizarre reconstruction. Well, let's see, if I did that, if I got married while I was psychotic, well, let's see, I must have liked the guy. Or I've heard some really odd memory issues.
What about her speech? Can you give me any commentary on her speech from the observations you made?
Her speech is generally, you can understand, I could understand her. She generally speaks in what we call connected sentences. So you can understand her speech. She's not, there's another term, word salad, for somebody who's psychotic, who just blah, blah, blah. You can't understand. It's called word salad. I've never, in her records, and when I interviewed her, she's never been like that. So you can understand her speech. And she'll speak in brief, what we call connected sentences. Sometimes they're logical, lucid, but other times not. They don't make sense. They're going off track. Whatever we're talking about, poof, she goes off track and says something totally different.
Are you saying that she goes off on tangents?
Very much so, yes. Not always, but yes, I observed that in the records too.
When you discuss certain topics, is she connected or disconnected?
Sometimes, like in the 2-hour interview, sometimes and again, my impression was that she tried really hard to answer my questions. Sometimes she was connected to what I was saying and to reality. Other times, no, definitely not connected, in my impression.
During the 2-hour interview that you had with her on June 19th, was she distracted by any internal or external stimuli?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
She was distracted by a clock on the, and this is one of these tangents, a clock on the conference room wall. She was distracted by a cord. We had just been talking about past suicide attempts, and she had tried apparently to hang herself, so when she was a teenager or younger, and she was distracted by a cord and a voice telling her to hang herself with that cord, but she said, I'm controlling it though. She had a train, she thought she saw a train, and a whistle that got louder and louder and louder. She was delusional in her thinking. So those are just some examples.
Did you ask her about her mood on a scale of 1 to 10?
I did.
And what was the response you got?
007, which was bizarre. And I think a reference to James Bond.
What could you take from that?
My impression was that, again, it was some tangent, and, it sounds pretty goofy, bizarre. I asked her to clarify that, and she really didn't. It led into a discussion of mania, bipolar 1 mania, and we discussed that, her impressions of bipolar, and has she ever had a manic episode.
Is obsessive compulsive disorder a mental disorder or issue?
Is it for her or just in general?
Just in general.
Yes, it's a mental disorder.
Did you talk to her about any compulsive behaviors or any issues like that?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I brought up the issue of hypersexuality, also just obsessive compulsive symptoms, traits, and she said sometimes she's will touch her hair a lot, she'll wash her hands 30 to 40 times with germs. But then I asked her about hypersexuality, which is sometimes seen in a person with bipolar 1 disorder when they're in a manic state, manic psychotic state, this hyper, too much interest, arousal with regarding something sexual. And she was very surprised. She had never heard of that. But she clicked on it. It was interesting. She clicked on it like, oh. And then she described some past obsessiveness, and I think she said in 2020, for about a year, when she and her husband viewed a lot, and she called it, obsessive, adult pornography.
Does hypersexuality give you concern or pause as it relates to mental health issues?
It does, because, and this wasn't the additional evidence about it, that she has likely, well, in my opinion, she has had hypersexuality during the bipolar disorder, when she was diagnosed at least age 14, but probably before that. She made inappropriate sexual comments in her classrooms while growing up at school. Then when she was inpatient, I believe the 21 days, I think it was Nicolay, and was it 2021, she was inappropriate. They caught her in the bathroom, 2 separate incidences with a male, 2 different male patients. I think there's been some incidences in the jail. I don't remember that exactly. But yes, that's definitely a concern. I've seen other people with inpatient, outpatient, who are hypersexual, and again, associated with bipolar mania, manic episode, or could be schizophrenia, but typically bipolar disorder. I've certainly seen that at Mendota and when I treated or evaluated people. It's not incredibly common, but it's one of the kind of classic symptoms of a bipolar manic episode.
Did Ms. Schabusiness say anything about her thinking and her feelings on that?
Yes.
What did she talk to you about?
You mean during that 2-hour interview?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd have to look at the exact quotes here, but the thinking, she hears screaming in the courtroom. It sounds like quite constant, she said. I'm looking here, yeah, she said she reported she hears screaming all day long, and not from the other jail inmates, telling her to wake up. Screaming happens, quote, a lot when she goes to court. It, quote, very much so, end of quote, affects her ability to concentrate on a daily basis and when in the courtroom. And then the voices, the screaming, are scary and tell her to do stuff. So her thinking I always ask people I evaluate, how is your thinking and memory? And to me, it's just the thinking it's difficult for her to think because of the bipolar symptoms of psychosis thinking. It affects her attention, her concentration, and messes up her thinking. Difficult.
As part of your complete analysis in this case, did you find that Taylor Schabusiness is married?
Yes.
And did she provide you with any information about the marital relationship?
Yes.
What did she say about that?
She said that, I hate to say this about someone not here, but she said that her spouse, who I believe they married in 2020, got her involved in methamphetamine use. He was a dealer. He was, again, her reports about this vary, but she has reported that he was very physically abusive. She told me that he hit her on the head numerous times. That was when I was evaluating her. Any head injuries ever in your past? And she mentioned that he had hit her on the head numerous times. So very controlling person, and she had gone to a neighbor's house at one time in 2020 to ask them to call 911, and another neighbor, when the police came, another neighbor said that she knew them both, and she said, yeah, he was abusive, controlling, drug pusher, addict, yeah. But she is still married. I believe but she was going to, in 2020, she was going to try to get the marriage annulled, but I don't think that's happened at this point.
Fairlick, while you're changing topics, I think we'll take our mid-morning break. We started a little bit later, but it's 10:45 right now, folks. We've been going for about an hour and a half. We'll take about a 10-minute break, so all rise for the jury. Anything before we recess, Mr. Saunders?
No, thank you.
Mr. Fairley?
No, thank you.
All right, and let's reconvene at 11 o'clock. We're recessed.
Thank you.
Okay, be seated. All right, we're back on the record. Mr. Freilich, the witness is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on your review of the educational records for Taylor Schabusiness, did you make any conclusions about whether she had a budding personality disorder?
No, I did not, no.
Okay. Did you see in the records that she was a really disturbed teen?
Yes, that was my impression.
And did you indicate that you felt that it even went beyond that?
Yes, which was later confirmed when we later received the Bellin inpatient records from when she was 12 and then again at 14, and was diagnosed with a thought disturbance, bipolar 1, depression, severe with psychosis by age 14.
Did you have a chance to review a colleague's evaluation, Dr. Tracy Lucetta?
Yes,
Is she a PhD?
she is a PhD.
And she reviewed or examined Taylor Schabusiness in the past, correct?
Yes,
So you had a chance to consider her report, correct?
yes,
Did you also review Dr. Matthew Seipel's report?
yes,
And he's a forensic psychologist from the Wisconsin Forensic Unit, correct?
yes,
And then did you also have the opportunity to review Dr. Christina Engine's report?
yes,
And these are reports that were conducted based off evaluations of Taylor Schabusiness, correct?
yes.
Before I ask you about whether you agree with their opinions or not, I'm going to ask you about what is your opinion as it relates to your evaluation and assessment of Taylor Schabusiness?
My opinion is that she qualifies for the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. My opinions are that she was not responsible because of a mental disease. She wasn't responsible for the criminal conduct because at the time of the event, she had the mental disease, and it both affected, she lacked substantial capacity to both appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct at the time the homicide occurred, but also she could not she couldn't conform. She lacked volitional control. She couldn't conform her conduct to the requirements of law. She was lacking in her ability to control herself. The volitional control both was lacking. That's my opinion.
You said that she lacked the ability to control herself?
Yes, at the time of the event.
And do you opine that she has a mental disease or a mental defect or both?
Yes.
Both?
It's unclear. I tried to get her to be evaluated. I suggested she be evaluated, as Dr. Lucetta did too, further for possible mental defect, brain issues. That didn't happen, but my impression was that she has a mental disease, which is the most likely bipolar disorder.
Based on your training and experience, can chemicals exacerbate?
They can, yes.
Did you draw any conclusions on whether Taylor Schabusiness has any kind of chronic brain damage?
I couldn't, because that has to be done. For the first step is what we call neuropsychological testing by a neuropsychologist. Pretty elaborate testing. That's the process. And then if those test results are abnormal, then the next step would be a referral to a neurologist and medical doctor who would assess her and then decide whether or not there was enough information from the testing to explore the possibility of some brain defect, brain damage, maybe, yeah.
Okay. In your report, your opinions are on the last page, is that fair?
Yes.
And did you talk about her presentation when she presents herself? Do you have comments about that?
Yes, my comments about that are that it's very unusual, what we call presentation. How is she looking? How does she talk? How does she interact? Everything. What's going on in her mind, whatnot. And it's really, really unusual. And I searched my own 32-year memory bank here, and it's exceptionally unusual presentation, how she's coming across to me, the two attorneys, other evaluators in the school.
Would you agree that she has a strange presentation?
She does.
How about her facial expressions? Can you give some commentary on that from what you've seen?
Very unusual. She's been described as smirky. Smirky. She has inappropriate, her grinning, weird grinning when she's talking about the crimes. People have interpreted it to be like laughing at what she did. At times, in the jail, with evaluators, with me, at times, briefly, it's very strange. Other times looking, I can mimic it, very scowly. A lot of people interpret it superficially to be grinning. Grinning it all, but getting a kick out of everything. Not me, Based on my experience and training, that's a psychotic person right there. That's what's causing this really weird, bizarre, and I'm telling you, to me it's off the scale. 32 years, I've seen a lot of psychotic people, bipolar, psychotic, manic, and I just haven't seen very many like this. Very exceptional, very exceptional.
Do you believe that she has a genuine mental disorder
Yes,
of a psychotic nature?
yes.
What is the nature?
The best, my best opinion is the bipolar 1, with sometimes with psychosis, sometimes not. But that after we got the Bellin records from 2 inpatient admissions at age 12 and 14, or 14 and 16, let me just double check, 14 and 16, she was diagnosed at 14 with bipolar depression, severe with psychosis. So that confirmed I was thinking about schizophrenia, and sometimes schizophrenia and bipolar are very hard to distinguish. Sometimes not, but sometimes really hard to tell bipolar from schizophrenia. And there's a kind of a combined one called schizoaffective disorder, and that that's been applied to her too, but I think based on this history we have from Belen when she was diagnosed with bipolar, and then again at Nicolay when she was 22 years old, also bipolar. My opinion is, based on my experience and training, is bipolar 1. The more serious, there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2. But bipolar 1 can have psychosis, psychotic episodes, so that's my opinion.
Are your opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty or psychological certainty?
Yes,
Both, correct?
yes.
You did prepare a report on all of these findings, correct?
Yes.
Could I approach your Honor?
You may.
Exhibit 6, did you identify what that is?
That is my report, July 3rd, 2023.
Does that report contain all of your findings and evaluations based on Taylor Schabusiness?
It's a brief summary, yes.
Everything in there is accurate, correct?
I hope so, yes, I think so.
Okay. And the report is dated July 3rd of 2023, correct?
Yes.
Offer Exhibit 6.
Any objection?
No.
6 is received.
Doctor, you did review Dr. Matthew Seipel's report, correct?
I did, two reports,
Okay. You read through both of them?
yes,
You're aware of the opinions and findings that he rendered, correct?
yes.
Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree.
Tell me why.
Contrary to how Dr. Seipel, his opinion, which I respect all professionals' opinions. I don't criticize the professional, I can support my own opinion. But in contrast, I believe that my opinion is that she has a genuine mental disorder.
And then Dr. Christina Engine, did you review her evaluation?
Yes,
And you agree or disagree with hers?
disagree.
Tell me why.
It's similar to Dr. Seipel, if I remember her report well enough, I disagree. My opinion is that Ms. Schabusiness has a genuine mental disorder of a psychotic nature.
Okay, I have no other questions, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Doctor.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm a little hidden here behind the court reporter, so I'll try to move over. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you testified you're an independent forensic psychologist, is that right?
That's right.
And does that mean that you're just sort of a solo practitioner, you're not employed with a larger facility?
Right, I don't work for anybody, I work for myself.
And you've been retained by the defense in this case?
Yes.
All right. So is there a retainer agreement in place?
No, say the very vast majority of my cases were for the public defender. So they have an appointment letter, how much they think they're gonna pay, like that. No money up front until the case is done and I bill,
I
or
understand.
he bills.
Sure. But you are being obviously compensated for your testimony.
No, I haven't been paid anything. No, I've been on this case, since I don't get paid till the case is all done.
Okay, but at the end of the case you will.
Right.
Okay. You were asked questions about having previously conducted NGI evaluations in the past.
Right.
How many?
Hundreds? I don't know, maybe, a lot.
All right. And how many in the last 10 years?
Many, and I have several right now, many.
Okay, so like dozens?
Oh, yes, at least, yes.
And your CV, do you still have that in front of you? I believe it's Exhibit
No.
1. You outlined some, on page 2, publications and presentations that you've completed, is that right?
Yes,
And for instance, in 2022, you had a publication or presentation on sexually violent persons.
yes,
And similarly in 2001, another publication on sexually violent persons.
Those were presentations, yes.
And would it be fair to say, I mean, looking through 2009 at least, all the publications and presentations we're seeing are with respect to sexually violent persons cases?
Most
Okay.
are, yes.
And do you have publications or have you presented on the topic of conducting NGI evaluations?
No. Other than 2018, a young colleague and I did a fill-in at the Wisconsin Psychological Association just on starting of forensic practice. And, you know, we talked about the different kinds of, like, it was to a group of psychologists who were thinking of getting to be a forensic psychologist, so we probably mentioned NGIs.
Okay. But that wasn't like a presentation on how to do NGI
No,
evaluations?
no.
Okay. I would then want to ask about some of your sources of information, and counsel went through some of those with you. With respect to what occurred on February 22nd, 2022, what sort of information did you review?
The criminal complaint. You said, what information did I review regarding that
Yes.
event?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because nobody was there. Parents were upstairs. So we don't have any direct witnesses, but I reviewed the police reports, all their interviews. That's basically it. What she told other evaluators and what she told me very briefly. So that was it.
So it was when you say police reports, you're referring to like the paper report that a detective or officer wrote?
Right, there's the criminal complaint or information, which is a couple pages long, but then attached usually with it, are the basis for the criminal charges. And, with the police, I guess in this case, the police who went there, arrested her, their interviews with her.
So did you just review the criminal complaint or also all of the police reports? in
All
case?
the police reports.
So then it sounds like you didn't review the recorded interview itself of Ms. Schabusiness.
Transcript, the recorded interview herself, and at least an hour and a half, 2 hours of the video interview.
I'm sorry, did you review the recorded interview of Ms. Schabusiness from February 23rd of 2022?
What I was given by the attorney was a transcript of their interviews. And so a transcript, written type,
Okay.
the transcript.
Was it like the police report summarizing it?
If I remember right, it was a transcript of I don't know if they had a court reporter in there. I don't know how they do that.
But not the actual visual image itself? You didn't review?
I only saw about an hour and a half, 2 hours of the visual, whatever you call that, video in those conference rooms where the police detectives were interviewing Ms. Schabusiness.
Okay. So you reviewed an hour and a half of that. Was that the February 23rd interview?
Yes, I believe so.
And so you didn't review the rest of the approximate 5.5 hours of that interview?
No, it didn't transmit to me by computer for some reason, so it was only roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours of what I did see.
The defense didn't provide the whole interview for you?
They tried, but for whatever reason, I don't know, technology between the DAs or what, that's happened before, not uncommon.
Sure. Well, to be clear, we aren't providing you any information to review, right?
What, pardon?
The state isn't providing you any information to review, right? You're getting that information from other people?
Well, I think it goes from you all to him.
Sure.
Yeah, right, and then to
Okay.
me, yeah.
So then it also sounds like, Doctor, you haven't reviewed the February 28th interview of Ms. Schabusiness?
I read the police descriptions of it, and I thought I had a transcript. I think it was a summary, pretty decent summary of the February 28th. Similar, the summary, pretty decent, detailed of the February 23, the 2 interviews they did on that day.
Okay. But not, again, the actual, visual image, the recorded interview itself?
Not from that one again. If it was sent to me, I couldn't
Okay.
see it.
Okay. And you mentioned that obviously one of your sources of information is from your meeting or meetings with Ms. Schabusiness?
Yes.
All right. And the the February 7th, 2023 interview, that was the instance where Ms. Schabusiness threw a chair at you, right?
Yes.
And after she did that, you said she just sat down.
Yeah.
All right. And was calm after that point?
Very, and I looked at her, as I'm subject to doing, I used that time before the guards came in, maybe, it took a while, 3 minutes or so, and it was weird, bizarre, whatever you want to call it, because she immediately, very calmly, came back, sat down across from me, and I looked at her physiological responses, just totally blank. And again, I've seen violent patients. I got attacked once, beat up at Mendota, got slapped. But I saw very many aggressions on the unit I was on at Mendota for the 14 most aggressive patients, males, in the whole state. And we'd have between 3 to 7 aggressions. And usually after a person does something like that, they have a red face, angry, yelling, swearing, breathing heavily, nothing.
So, those prior instances you talked about, those were with people who were at Mendota, you said?
Yeah.
So those were people who were actually found to have a mental illness.
No, not all of them. We were the overflow unit. We mostly had, our patients were from around the state, jails, prisons, Winnebago mental health. They were most of them had been found not guilty, legally insane, but we were the overflow unit for the admission unit for competency evaluation. So they were not all necessarily mentally ill, but most were with a psychotic illness.
And those were the people who you made a gesture, like a red face,
Yeah,
things like
but
that after.
I've dealt with many aggressive people in the outpatient setting too. And yeah, it was unusual. I just don't, searching my memory banks, had a hard time coming up with somebody. I've seen it before, but it's unusual for a person to not be aroused, when they're feeling so angry. It was unusual.
And then I want to ask about the June 19th, 2023 interview with Ms. Schabusiness. And that was at a conference room area,
Yes,
and her attorney was present for that, right?
yes.
And is it common for you to have those sort of evaluations with an interested party in the room?
I always ask attorneys, going back to when I was at Mendota, I learned this at Mendota, I always ask attorneys, if they have the time, to sit in at least during the initial part, like for a competency evaluation, so I can see the attorney and the client interacting. And so it gives me more information about whether the defendant is understanding what's going on, if they're able to work with their attorney. So I always ask attorneys to do that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't have time, whatever. It was unusual, though, in this case, that the defense attorney sat in through the whole thing. I did it for a particular reason, though.
Okay. And then you talked about exhibit number 4. Do you still have that in front of you, Doctor? It's the chart you prepared.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right.
Okay. I know there's a number of exhibits here. So you kind of listed the age of Ms. Schabusiness at the time of various admissions. Is that right?
Right, approximate age.
So it looks like ages 14, there was a Bellin Health Psychiatric Center.
Yes,
Age 16 from Bellin Health Psychiatric.
yes,
And then there was nothing that was reviewed until Ms. Schabusiness was 23.
right.
So you reviewed no mental health history, and you're aware of no mental health history from ages 16 through 23.
Well, 2020, she was in the jail, or no, I guess that was 2020, when she was 22. So, yeah, no, there's a gap. Yeah.
So there wasn't anything, I guess, from 16 to 22 then?
Not that I know of.
And when you were kind of summarizing the chart in Exhibit 4, I noticed a few times that when you were describing hallucinations, there was also sometimes then concurrently reports of methamphetamine use. Is that fair?
Yes.
And in your experience, methamphetamine can produce psychosis as a side effect.
Yes, it can in some cases.
And that was actually reported in quite a few of these records, wasn't it?
It was.
All right. So then I want to ask about the Bellin stay in 2012. You reviewed those records, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in particular, did you review the discharge summary?
Yes.
And I guess the discharge summary, that's kind of like the exit interview, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
All right. So you would recognize that if you were to see it?
Maybe. But I have it on the chart. I believe at the discharge, she was diagnosed with mood disorder, not otherwise specified, without psychosis by the 3 days.
Okay. And that's exactly right, Doctor. So I'm going to show you Exhibit 7. Does that appear to be the discharge summary we're talking about?
Yes.
And in discharge diagnoses, you mentioned a mood disorder without psychosis.
Yes.
Nowhere in the discharge diagnosis is there a bipolar diagnosis, is there?
Yes, that's true.
And in fact, if you could flip to the last page of that, it says page 118 on the bottom, but it's the last page of that stapled packet, Doctor. Do you see the portion that says condition on discharge?
Yes.
Okay, and it says, quote, on exam, Taylor denied hallucinations or thoughts of harm toward herself or others, a wish to be dead, or that she would be better off dead. Did I state that accurately?
Yes.
And that was the Bellin Health Records from 2012.
Yes.
I then want to ask about the Bellin Health Records from 2014. You reviewed those as well?
Yes.
And there was a portion that contained the discharge notes as well. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Okay, I'm going to show you Exhibit 8, Doctor. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Does that appear to be some of the discharge notes from October 29th of 2014?
This was difficult because you see at the top and all through here, pretty weird, because it's got, every page at the top says 10/28/2014, admission, and then parentheses, discharged from assess at Bellin. So it's confusing. It was one of the more confusing I've been reviewing medical records since I was age 14 as a candy striper. And this was hard. So it's difficult to figure out, is this the final discharge? And I think I finally concluded, she was only there for 3 days, so I think it's the discharge, but it's the discharge summary, but it is confusing. You have to look at all the dates and everything, but this was really confusing.
Sure. But if you could, Doctor, flip to the last page of that exhibit. Do you see the area where it lists the diagnosis for
Yes.
Schabusiness? And there's 2 diagnoses, aren't there?
Right,
One of which is cannabis abuse, continuous.
right,
The other is alcohol abuse, episodic.
yes.
Okay, there's not a bipolar diagnosis listed there, is there?
No, there's not.
And there's not that prior mood disorder that we heard about in 2012, is there?
Somewhere in these pages, I believe, that,
And I'm sorry, Doctor, if the question
Okay.
isn't clear, in the diagnosis part, neither of those diagnoses are listed, are they?
exactly, no bipolar, and what else was the other thing you said? Mood
The
disorder.
mood disorder.
Yes, you're right.
And that was the Bellin from 2012, right?
Yes, age 16.
I then want to ask about these records from Nicolay Psychiatric, and that's sort of the county admission, right, to locked facility?
Yes.
Okay, and actually, the St. Mary's hospital visit you testified to on direct, that was like the day before the admission to the Nicolay Center, right?
I think it was the day of. I
Okay.
think that it looks like, because it's March 22nd, 2021, I think St. Mary's ER discharged her right to Nicolay.
Right.
I think that's how that went down.
Okay. So when Ms. Schabusiness was admitted into Nicolay, she had a drug screen done, did she not?
Yes.
And that drug screen was positive for controlled substance, was it not?
I believe so. I don't have it written down here, but substance use, yes. And then, by then, my memory is that it was meth, I think, probably THC, marijuana.
And Doctor, you had reviewed those records from Nicolay Psychiatric, right?
Yes.
And those helped you reach your conclusion?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to show you Exhibit 9. Now, I didn't mean to test your memory. I know you reviewed a lot of records. So does that appear to be the notes from Ms. Schabusiness's admission into Nicolay Psychiatric?
Yes.
And that's dated March 22nd of 2021.
Did you say 27th? It's 23rd.
March 20, you're correct. The admission date is March 22nd.
Yes.
Okay, and the date of service that's listed here is March 23rd.
Right.
And then in the history of present illness, it states in the second line, she has been using methamphetamine. She would not tell me how often and how much she has been using it, but drug screen was positive for methamphetamine, amphetamine, and THC. Did I state that accurately?
Yes.
All right. And then Nicolay Psychiatric, that's a sort of locked facility, right?
That's my understanding is it is. I don't think I've ever been there, but my understanding is it's probably locked, I would guess.
Is it a facility that's sort of closely monitored? And
Yes. I think they do. I think I did read that they lock their units, I believe.
I guess the purpose of all that staff presumably is to watch after patients.
Well, right, because she was there on a mental health commitment, so she either had to have been dangerous to herself or to somebody else, and those are usually locked units.
So presumably, people who are in that facility aren't, using controlled substances anymore,
Usually.
usually. So then I'm going to show you exhibit number 10. Does that appear to be the discharge notes from Nicolay Psychiatric?
Yes, this one we know because it says final summary on the top.
And that date is April 12th of 2021.
Yes.
And there still is for the discharge diagnosis, as you mentioned, a bipolar diagnosis, right?
Yes.
Can you flip to the second page? On condition on discharge, it states the patient has a bright affect. Is that right?
Yes,
That she is forward-looking.
yes,
That she showed some motivation regarding remaining clean and sober.
yes,
That she denies any delusional beliefs.
yes,
That she, I guess it notes, there's still some degree of paranoia is present, but denies any thoughts of self-harm.
yes.
And that was after being in that facility for that time.
And she was just started on, she was on oral antipsychotic, but she just was started on the injected medicine, the longer acting injected antipsychotic, it's called atypical antipsychotic medication, which then she didn't stay on. After the 6-month order to treat, she.
But also on April 12th, she presumably would have been free from methamphetamine, amphetamine, and THC.
From the, so 21 days, you know, usually in general, it would have been out of her system, but it could be still possibly affecting her thought processes. That's just, you just don't know, because the testing wasn't done.
Sure.
But no, but totally, yeah, she still had some paranoia. It says some degree of paranoia was still there. However, she wasn't, no delusional beliefs, so she wasn't super psychotic, wasn't psychotic.
And actually, I glossed over two discharge diagnoses. One was the bipolar, right?
Yes,
Well, there was a second one, wasn't there?
yes, substance use disorder, i.e., in other words, THC, marijuana, and methamphetamine.
Thank you. You talked then about some of these hallucinations that are scattered throughout the records you reviewed, right?
Yes,
And some of those are things that the defendant is endorsing. Isn't that fair?
yes.
And what does endorsing mean?
She's saying self-report, she's reporting them herself, she's describing some of them herself, not a lot over her history. Are you talking about the hallucinations?
Just the concept of what endorsing means. And I
Yeah,
think you stated
that's,
it.
yeah, just
Something
saying,
that's reported by a person.
do you have a headache? And if you say yes, that you're endorsing the headache.
Thank you. And actually, while we're still on the topic of the bipolar diagnosis at Nicolay Psychiatric, you mentioned that you reviewed a report authored by Dr. Lucetta. Is that right?
Yes,
And Dr. Lucetta was a expert retained by the defense earlier in the case.
yes,
And she prepared a report that you reviewed.
yes,
And part of that report, Dr. Lucetta spoke with Ms. Schabusiness.
yes.
And do you recall a portion where they were discussing that bipolar diagnosis?
I don't remember that exactly.
Would it
I'd have
assist
to look at it.
Would it assist to review
Sure.
Dr. Lucetta's report? Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 11. Does that appear to be consistent with Dr. Lucetta's report?
I believe so,
And you reviewed that report?
yes.
Doctor, if you could turn to page 3 of that report. In the second paragraph, I guess it's the first full paragraph. Sort of the last sentence of that. And it says, quote, she, and that refers to Ms. Schabusiness, questioned the bipolar diagnosis, hypothesizing that her symptoms were attributable to methamphetamine abuse, explaining that prior to admission, she had been administering the drug intravenously up to 9 times per day for 5 to 8 months prior to her admission. Did I read that right?
Yes,
And that's referencing the Nicolay records that we just talked about, right?
yes.
And that's where the bipolar diagnosis came from.
Just a second here. She seems to be, at the right beginning, it says Ms. Schabusiness reported that she was previously admitted, blah, 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 blah. And it seems like that's what she's telling to Dr. Lucetta. But then at the point where that last sentence, she questioned the bipolar, that's, and I had difficulty. I remember reading this, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I think you're right that when she's questioning, she questioned the bipolar diagnosis, attributing it maybe to methamphetamine abuse. I think Dr. Lucetta is taking that Ms. Schabusiness, that's what she told Nicolay, the psychiatric staff there, I think.
That your interpretation is that sentence refers to what Ms. Schabusiness told Nicolay?
Well, Ms. Schabusiness told Dr. Lucetta at the beginning of the paragraph that she was admitted to Nicolay. Okay, so that's her self-report. She was vague about why admitted, bipolar. She was diagnosed with bipolar. She was discharged. She discontinued the medication. She doesn't like to take medication. She questioned the bipolar diagnosis. So I'm not sure if that reflects when she was at Nicolay or what she's telling Dr. Lucetta. I'll go, and you think it was Dr. Lucetta, so that's okay, because she's done that. Sometimes she will say, this is Ms. Schabusiness, yeah, I've been diagnosed with bipolar. Other times she will say, I don't think I've got it. I don't like to take medications. It varies. It does vary. So, but let's just agree that this is what she's telling Dr. Lucetta, but it's a little hazy there.
And I guess the point, Doctor, in any event, the sentence I read, those were the statements of Ms. Schabusiness regarding the bipolar diagnosis.
Right, regardless if she's telling Dr. Lucetta or the treaters at Nicolay. She questioned it. Not unusual.
Sure. I then, Doctor, would like to talk a little bit more about bipolar 1. What is the diagnostic criteria for bipolar 1?
Ugh. When a person has, by definition, they have to have had at least one what's called a manic episode, which is extremely elevated mood, and it can be with psychosis, thought disorder, or not. But they have to have at least one prior or current manic episode. By two things. It's either you go from depression, really bad depression with bipolar 1, super duper suicidal type, real depression, and then they have to have in their history at least one of these real super duper elevated moods, and it's bizarre when you see it. It's pretty bizarre. Yeah, so that's basically it.
So you need at least one manic episode.
Yes, I believe that's in the diagnosis.
And in order to diagnose a manic episode, there are 4 criteria, aren't there?
We look at the mood, a very elevated, exceptionally elevated mood. And then usually there's these other behaviors that go along with it. Again, the person can be psychotic, not necessarily, but they can be psychotic in this very elevated mood. And then they usually are some other behaviors. They can stay up for 3-4 days. They wildly spend, sometimes gamble away, hypersexual. Energy, feeling super energetic.
So there are 4 criteria, right?
Yeah, I don't have my DSM book in front of me, but
So the DSM-5 that you referenced, what is that?
that's the American Psychiatric, MD's Psychiatric Association Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th edition. I think out in about 2015, I think it was, put out, and it's used in this country for mental health diagnoses and billing.
You would agree it's a pretty commonly used and widely accepted
In the
source?
United States, yes.
So for a bipolar 1 diagnosis, The first criteria is that there's a distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated behavior. Is that fair?
Yes,
And that period has to last, quote, at least 1 week and present most of the day, nearly every day. Does that sound right?
yes,
So it's not just a manic episode that, is an hour, right? It's a long period of time that
Yeah.
somebody's manic
right.
in a heightened state. Is that fair?
Yes, yes,
And then the second criteria is some of those, symptoms, mood disturbances. You mentioned gambling, things like that are exhibited.
yes,
And that mood disturbance, the third criteria, also has to cause an impairment of some kind, right?
a what?
An impairment of some kind?
Yes, an impairment, yes,
And then the fourth criteria for a bipolar 1 diagnosis is that the manic episode is not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance,
Yes,
i.e. a drug,
yes,
such as methamphetamine.
exactly,
So,
or LSD,
sure.
something.
So if you're observing a manic episode, but you have information that there was recent methamphetamine use, that would be a concern for a bipolar 1 diagnosis.
Yes, without further information or more observations.
Doctor, I then want to ask some questions about your report. I believe it's is it 6? Is that still in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, is that exhibit 6?
Yes, that's the most recent
Okay.
exhibit.
So, your report and your opinions that you're testifying to today regarding NGI rely in part based on your observations of Ms. Schabusiness on June 19th, right?
Correct, yes,
And actually, as a result of that interview, based on your observations, you had a concern about her present competency in that moment, didn't you?
yes,
And in fact, your report that you're referencing in Exhibit 6 is sort of a combination NGI report and competency.
yes, that's
And-
what I was asked to do.
And those legally are different concepts, right?
They are,
Competency is sort of in the moment,
yes,
and NGI obviously refers to the date of the offense.
the time of the offense,
Okay, so during your interview with Ms. Schabusiness, you had a concern about her competency.
yes.
Objection,
Yeah.
relevance. Move to strike.
Yet you're using her statements to form your NGI opinion.
Her statements, my observations, but not just that 2-hour interview. It was the entire information I had about the case. But yes, you're right. During the interview, it helped me to form my opinions because I submitted a mini report months before that where I couldn't make an opinion because I hadn't been able to interview her. That was, well, both competency and NGI.
Thank you. So then I want to ask about malingering. What does that mean to you?
Malingering is intentional faking of symptoms. Could be about anything, any symptoms, but in the psychiatric profession, malingering is intentional faking of mental health system.
Is that sort of a synonym for feigning or something like that?
Yeah, that's a fancy, malingering, feigning, faking. I simplify it, faking.
Sure.
Intentional faking.
Right. And you would agree that's been a concern for evaluators who have met with Ms. Schabusiness.
Yes.
Dr. Seipel had that concern, did he not?
I think he concluded, if my memory's right, I think he concluded that's it, yes.
I think you're right. Dr. Seipel concluded she was faking, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And it was a concern raised by Dr. Lucetta, was it not?
Yes, definitely.
And again, she was an
Injury?
expert retained by the defendant.
Yes,
And that she suggested these potential for feigning should be explored further.
exactly.
And in fact.
Impatient.
And in fact, in your field, there are tools that can be used to help determine if somebody is accurately providing you information, right?
Yes,
One of those is the MMPI.
yes.
And those, have you used those before?
Oh, yeah.
And they're helpful for you to know if a patient is providing you accurate information.
But.
I'm
you-
sorry.
Yes, but you have to take that it's one part of the clinical evaluation, but you gotta evaluate it with other information to decide if it's an accurate test result.
Sure. But you need that information to then know if it's accurate, right?
You need what information?
You need to perform the test.
You don't have to perform, I don't have to perform fancy 500, 300, I don't have to do that. That's not a requirement. Psychiatrists don't do psychological testing. So sometimes I might do it, but I've done many evaluations without that when I have enough other information that you're not required, there's nothing that says, you're a psychologist, you gotta do MMPI. No, you don't have to do that. But I've done it many times.
And Doctor, I wasn't suggesting that. What I was suggesting is you mentioned that you need to take that test into account and see if it's accurate, essentially, right?
If you've done the test,
Yeah.
sure. Or if somebody else, like in this case, it had been done by all these other people, so I consider that information. And that they found that, yes, she had, the other thing, she had over-presented, we call it the test, can detect. When you're over-presenting a symptom, like, oh my God, I really got a bad headache, really super, like that, you over-present it. It basically, again, it could be faking, but it's just an exaggeration. That's another term we use.
Sure. So, but in your report, again, Exhibit 6, I think you quote, psychological testing by other evaluators found signs of possible malingering or intentional faking of mental disorder symptoms. Is that a fair summary of what you wrote in your report?
Yes.
All right. And at the end of your report, it says, quote, testing can reveal attempts to fake a mental disorder, end quote. Did I quote that accurately? It's on page 9 of your report, Doctor. Last sentence.
Right, yes.
And so what attempts did you make to use some of those tests to determine if Schabusiness was faking?
Yeah, good question. I looked at the other psychologists' test results, plus another evaluator done concerning her baby, Child Protective Services. I think he did testing too. So I look at those results. Yes, they showed exactly what you're saying, but then I take that in the context of the rest of the evaluation and my experience and training.
So, Doctor, you did not conduct any of those tests with Schabusiness on June 19th?
Yes. Or is that no? Which way do I answer that
Sure.
one? I did not conduct any of those tests, right, on whenever I,
Even though
The
those
day.
tests can be helpful to determine if a patient is providing you accurate information.
yes,
And you didn't utilize any of those tests in this case?
no.
Asked and answered objection.
Thank you, Doctor. I have nothing further.
It's going to be a bit, Your Honor. Do you want to take a break or should I ask some questions? Okay. With regards to your report and evaluation of my client, did you get a sense that she was feigning or faking?
At times with me, or not with me during our interview, I didn't think that was, or my interview, I didn't think that was faking at all. No, But with other evaluators, and again, the test results, it's based on my education, my training in this field, my impression was that if there was I don't think there was intentional faking, period. I think we're dealing with my opinion is we're dealing with a genuine mentally ill person who occasionally is treated, takes medications. I don't think she's intentionally faking symptoms, even in the test results. The test results show that she was exaggerating symptoms of a mental illness. However, Dr. Tracy Lucetta in her report, I believe it's in her writer report, she points out that the majority of people with those feigning, malingering test results, they're later found out not to have been intentionally faking.
When, in your experience, in your training, do people sometimes who are going through a psychological evaluation or some kind of an assessment tend to over-present? They want to put themselves in a good light?
Sometimes I've done those tests, yeah, and every forensic evaluation, I assess a person for malingering, everyone, I do. I don't necessarily give all the tests, occasionally I do, but we have even other tests for just faking. And I sometimes use that, but yeah, sometimes people do that for various reasons.
With regards to Dr. Lucetta, you read the whole report, correct?
Yes,
And she had recommended transfer to one of the state psychiatric facilities like Mendota Mental Health or Winnebago, correct?
right, for testing, neuropsychological testing and medications, and yes.
And before you wrote your July 3rd, 2023 report, you did consider all of the information, the interview on June 19th, the interviews in February, is that true?
Yes,
And all the records, correct?
yes,
And you're indicating to the court that you did review some of the video clipped information between Ms. Schabusiness and the detectives?
yes,
So you considered all of that information, correct?
yes,
Your opinions aren't just based off of what happened on June 19th, correct?
no,
And as it relates to the DSM-5 manual, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that psychologists use, you're familiar with the elements for bipolar 1?
yes,
And did Taylor Schabusiness exhibit some of those elements based on what you saw?
yes. And she confirmed she had had those experiences in the past, too.
And oftentimes when psychologists do testing, they would do the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, correct?
Yes.
It's a series of questions, correct?
The short version is 300.
And then you gotta answer these questions, and then you gather information from that, fair?
Yeah, it's put into it, nowadays it's put into a computer and, yeah.
It's a computer test, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't have the computer version. I don't know if it's all, I don't know how that works.
Let me ask you this. With the other test, the other gold standard test for psychologists is the MCMI, correct?
Yeah.
The Milan Clinical Multi-Axial Inventory Test?
Yes,
Is that another written test?
it is.
Was it your understanding that Dr. Matthew Seipel did not use the MMPI or the MCMI?
No, he didn't use them.
Other psychologists had already done that, correct?
Right,
And you reviewed those reports, correct?
yes.
So you went right to it and got the materials and analyzed things from a psychological standpoint, correct?
Right, I didn't think there was any utility, any use to giving her the whole test again when she had had it, I don't know, 3, 4 times?
Wasn't necessary, is that fair?
I didn't think so, no.
In some of these records from Bellin, did you see that she was huffing gas, or, excuse me, huffing nail polish in 2013?
Yeah.
Jack, this is outside the scope of cross.
It's in the exhibit, it's in Exhibit 8. I can grab the exhibit, Your Honor.
I guess I'll need to see exhibit 8 to allow the objection.
8?
Right, I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead and answer, Doctor.
That's true, right? She was, she admitted to huffing nail polish in 2013.
About then, yes.
Your Honor, could I have Exhibits 7, 8, 9, 10? with regards to Bellin Psychiatric Center, her discharge summary, it does indicate, Access 1, that she had a mood disorder, correct?
I believe so, yes. Was that from the 2012?
Yes.
Yes.
And at least at that time, it did talk about hallucinations, correct?
Yes, and when she came in, they,
Doctor, if you
oh,
just
yes.
focus on his question, he asked if it referenced it, okay?
yes.
It did, okay. And Exhibit 9 here, the Nicolay Psychiatric Center Inpatient Mental Health Unit. The initial evaluation did indicate on the bottom, diagnosis was bipolar disorder, correct?
Yes.
And on the Exhibit 10, fair to say that the final summary for Nicolay Psychiatric Center for Taylor Schabusiness, she was admitted 3/22 of 2021, admitted with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, correct? That was one of them?
Yes.
And then she was discharged April 12th of 2021, again with bipolar disorder as one of the discharge diagnoses, correct?
Yes.
And that on admission, that her thought content showed that she appeared to be having auditory hallucinations and delusions of persecution, correct?
Yes.
And suicidal ideation.
I believe so, yes. Oh, yes.
And is it fair to say that based on what you understood, that Ms. Schabusiness did not take her medications after she was released from Nicolay Psychiatric Center in April of 2021?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And that, at least according to that document, her affect was flat?
Yes.
What does that mean, her affect was flat?
Oh, I'm gonna get a little cough drop here. That means that, facial expressions just emotionless, flat emotions.
As it relates to these other exhibits, Exhibit 9, she was prescribed Abilify for mood stabilization, is that correct?
Yes, and what was that one from? Is it,
The date of service, it indicates 3/23 of 21,
so that was Nicolay?
yes.
Yeah, she was prescribed, yes. Prescribed, first she was on Abilify, I think when she came in, and then they switched her to the longer acting injected medicine just to make it easier, but then she didn't like it because it hurt. The injection hurt.
And at least at Nicolay, she was brought in on an EM1 petition because she was hearing voices, correct?
Yes,
And she was seeing people who were not there, is that correct?
yes.
Okay, no other questions, thank you.
Mr. Saunders, any further questions?
Just very briefly, the question about having a flat affect, about the reported hallucinations, about being brought in on a Chapter 51, that was upon admission into Nicolay, right?
Yes,
When she was testing positive for methamphetamine and other substances.
right, substance use.
Thank you, doctor.
Anything on those topics?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, you're excused.
I think I did forget to move 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Any objection to 7, 8, 9, and 10?
No objection.
Those will be received.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can I just make sure, a lot of things are going on in my head. Were all my exhibits offered and accepted?
Yes.
Okay. Exhibit 5, if it's not, I'll offer it.
Any objection to 5? Mr. Saunders?
No.
5 is received.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our lunch break now. It is 5 after 12. I'm going to ask that you be back in the jury room no later than 1:15. I'd like to get underway right at that time. All rise for the jury. Be seated. Couple of things I want to cover with you. First of all, Mr. Freeland, are you going to have any more witnesses?
I'm going to talk to my client, Your Honor, about whether I'm going to have her testify, but other than that, no.
Sure.
I may not have her testify, I have to talk to her.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and that's something I wanted to cover because in my research, they tell judges that we don't necessarily have to make inquiry of a defendant at this phase, but it's best practice to do so, and far be it for me to try to avoid best practice. So I think I would undertake that qualification or that the colloquy with your client when we return and when you advise me whether you have other witnesses. If you're indicating after lunch that she would be your only witness and you don't intend to call her, then I'd have that colloquy before we bring the jury back in.
Okay, Your Honor.
Just so everybody knows that.
Thank you.
Then the other thing I want the parties to take a look at, I'm going to provide you after the lunch break, is the proposed jury instructions, and I want you to give some thought to how you want that laid out. My suggestion is that, and I'm open-minded on this, so I just want you to think about it, and you can certainly push back a little bit if you want, that I would give the, at the conclusion of evidence, I would give the instruction 160 regarding closings. Then I would have you close. Then I would give a modified version of 100. That's the preliminary instruction indicating to the jurors that I'll instruct them upon the principles of the law, that they shouldn't use any impression that they may have of my thoughts in any way, and that they're to follow the instructions that I give them. So I propose to give a modified 100. I'll modify it over the lunch hour, give it to you. You can take a look at it, and your response might be, I don't want you to give that at all, or I want you to modify it differently, but that I would give 100. I might give 315, Mr. Freilich. That is the instruction that if your client chooses not to testify, I could certainly give that instruction again. Although this is a civil matter and I'm not sure that it's really necessary, but that is a possibility. Then I would give 640, which is mental disease or defect expert opinion testimony, and 605, which is the instruction, the base instruction on this proceeding, and then the jury would go into deliberations. That's what I would propose. I'll give you my draft of those instructions after lunch. You can think about it, and we can have further conversation then. Anything else before we break? Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Freilich?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, then I'd ask you to be back in about an hour. That'll be 1:05. The jury will be back at 1:15. We can take up anything then. All right, we're in recess.
Thank you.
Counsel, Dr. Lytton is asking whether or not you